Picture this. You're 6 years old. It's your first day at a brand new school. Sounds exciting, right?
Yeah.
But instead of friendly faces and welcoming classrooms, you're met by a screaming mob, hateful signs everywhere you look, and even a coffin with a black doll inside. This wasn't some dystopian nightmare. This was Ruby Bridges' reality in 1960s New Orleans.
It's a chilling image for sure. It really captures the intensity of the resistance to desegregation, even after the landmark Brown v. Board of Education ruling.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. How this pivotal case unfolded, the people who made it happen, and the long shadow it casts on America even today.
It's fascinating, We often think of these big legal battles as, well, abstract events.
Oh, wait, just dates and names in a textbook.
Yeah, exactly. But this case in particular shows the human cost of inequality and the personal stories of those who fought for change.
Absolutely. So to really understand Brown v. Board, we need to rewind the clock a bit, way back to 1892, and a seemingly simple train ride.
Ah, yes. This is where we meet Homer Plessy, a shoemaker in Louisiana. He made a decision that would change the course of history. He chose to board a whites-only train car.
Now, from what I remember, Plessy was light-skinned. He could have easily passed as white.
That's right. But under the law, because of his ancestry, he was classified as colored.
So this wasn't just a random act, was it? There was a bigger purpose behind his choice.
Absolutely. It was a carefully planned act of defiance, orchestrated by a group of activists, their goal, to challenge the Separate Car Act head-on, and of course, its constitutionality. This set the stage for the landmark Plessy v. Ferguson Supreme Court case.
And this is where that infamous separate but equal doctrine enters the picture.
Unfortunately, yes. The Supreme Court ultimately ruled against Plessy, and in doing so, they established this devastating doctrine. It would permeate American society for decades.
It's hard to believe that something like that, the idea that separate could ever truly be equal, could be enshrined in law.
It was a dark chapter in our history, no doubt. It essentially legalized segregation. As long as separate facilities for black and white people were deemed equal, which, of course, they rarely were.
Right. The inherent inequality was baked right into the idea. So building on this foundation of, well, let's call it flawed legal precedent, we fast forward to the 1950s and the rise of the NAACP, led by the brilliant legal mind of Thurgood Marshall.
The NAACP recognized the deep inequalities that Plessy v. Ferguson reinforced, and they strategically chose to target segregation in education. They understood that education. It's the bedrock of a just society.
I think most people would agree with that. Education is the key to opportunity.
Exactly, but they were very deliberate in their approach.
They weren't just taking on any case that came their way.
No, they were incredibly meticulous. They waited for the perfect case, the one that could challenge separate but equal head-on.
And that's where Oliver Brown and his daughter in Topeka, Kansas come in.
Yes, that's right.
So tell me more about this case. What made it the linchpin for the NAACP's strategy?
Well, Oliver Brown's daughter was denied entry to a white school, a school that was much closer to her home, and instead she was forced to travel a significant distance to attend a black school. It was a stark injustice, and it became the focal point for what we now know as Brown v. Board of Education.
It's mind-boggling that this kind of blatant discrimination was still happening in the 1950s.
It shows just how deeply entrenched segregation was.
Absolutely. But Marshall and the NAACP knew that to dismantle the system, they couldn't just rely on legal arguments alone.
Right, they needed something more. They needed to demonstrate the real harm inflicted by segregation.
And that's where the Dole test comes in.
Precisely.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. The Dole test. How does a psychological study become a weapon against segregation?
Well, this groundbreaking study was conducted by Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife. They revealed the profound psychological impact of segregation on young minds. They showed black children dolls of different races and asked them seemingly simple questions.
Like what?
Things like, which doll is good? Or which doll is bad?
And the results, if I remember correctly, were heartbreaking. They really exposed the insidious nature of segregation.
They were incredibly powerful. The study showed that black children, often as young as 3, associated positive qualities with the white dolls and negative qualities with the black dolls.
It's a stark illustration of how deeply prejudice can affect even the youngest minds.
It's a testament to the insidious nature of segregation, how it warped perceptions of self-worth.
So the NAACP had this compelling legal argument in the Brown case, coupled with this groundbreaking psychological evidence from the Dole test. What happened next? How did the Supreme Court respond?
In 1954, the court issued a unanimous decision. They overturned separate but equal.
Wow, unanimous.
Yes, it was landmark ruling. It sent shockwaves through the nation and signaled a major turning point in the fight for civil rights.
That's pretty incredible considering how divided the country was on the issue.
It speaks volumes about the power of the arguments presented and the recognition of the deep injustice perpetuated by separate but equal.
But didn't one of the judges initially disagree with the decision?
You're right. Justice Stanley Reed had some reservations at first about overturning Plessy v. Ferguson, but he eventually aligned with the other judges. And in a display of profound respect, he even shared his personal notes with Thurgood Marshall.
Wow, that's a fascinating detail. It shows that even within a seemingly clear-cut victory, there were complexities and nuances at play.
Exactly. But it also highlights the importance of dialogue and the ability to change one's mind when presented with compelling evidence.
It's a good reminder for all of us
Mm-hmm.
that listening to different perspectives can lead to greater understanding.
Couldn't agree more.
So we have this monumental legal victory with Brown v. Board, but then we come back to Ruby Bridges, and that powerful image of her facing down a mob on her way to school. It really underscores that while Brown v. Board was a huge legal win, it didn't magically erase the deeply ingrained racism and resistance to desegregation.
You're absolutely right, especially in the South. Brown v. Board established the legal precedent, but changing hearts and minds, well, that was a whole other battle.
And that's a battle that continues to this day. But we'll delve deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive, so be sure to join us again as we explore the aftermath of Brown v. Board and its lasting impact on America.
I'll be here. Yeah, Ruby's story, it's just one of many, It shows the reality on the ground, especially in the South. There was so much resistance to the changes brought about by Brown v. Board.
So how did this one case, as significant as it was, how did it actually start to dismantle this deeply entrenched system of segregation?
Well, you can think of it like a series of dominoes.
Okay, I like that.
Once the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
the highest court in the land, declared segregation in education unconstitutional, well, it became much harder to justify it anywhere else.
So it created this ripple effect,
Yeah.
a chain reaction almost.
Exactly. Suddenly, civil rights activists had this powerful legal precedent on their side. And you start seeing challenges to segregation everywhere. Buses, restaurants, voting booths, you name it.
So Brown v. Board gave them the legal ammunition they needed.
They could say, hey, if separate can't be equal in schools, then how can it be equal anywhere else?
It's amazing to think about how one case can spark such widespread change.
It really is.
But I imagine there was pushback, right? I mean, people in power don't usually give up their power and privilege that easily.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. The South especially, they dug in their heels. They resisted integration with everything they had.
We see this with Ruby Bridges, but also in countless other instances across the country.
Yeah, some schools just flat out refused to integrate. Others used delaying tactics, loopholes, anything to avoid compliance.
So it sounds like a whole new wave of legal battles erupted after Brown v. Board.
It was a legal arms race, in a way.
And it wasn't just confined to courtrooms, right?
No, not at all. The civil rights movement gained so much momentum during this time. Protests, demonstrations, all demanding equality.
The Montgomery bus boycott, the freedom rides, the March on Washington.
Exactly. All of these pivotal moments, they were fueled in part by the legal precedent set by Brown v. Board.
So thinking about the long arc of history, where does this all leave us today? I mean, segregation is illegal. We've had a black president, a black vice president, black Supreme Court justices. Have we truly moved beyond the legacy of separate but equal?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
On the surface, yeah, we've made significant progress.
We've come a long way.
But those echoes of that system, that deeply rooted belief in separating people based on race, they still resonate today.
In what ways? Are there any specific examples of how that legacy is still felt in America today?
Absolutely. Think about the ongoing struggle for equal funding in schools. Schools in predominantly black and brown neighborhoods, they often receive fewer resources, they have less experienced teachers, they offer fewer advanced placement courses, compared to schools in wealthier, predominantly white areas.
That's a huge problem.
It's a direct consequence of historical segregation and discriminatory housing policies that continue to affect communities of color.
It's like segregation has taken on a new, more insidious form.
In a way, yes. And it's not just limited to education either.
Right, it's everywhere.
We see similar disparities in healthcare access, employment opportunities, even exposure to environmental hazards. like pollution and toxic waste.
Those are serious issues.
They're a stark reminder that the legacy of separate but equal, it continues to cast a long shadow over American society.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
It makes you realize how far we still have to go. But at the very least, Brown v. Board, it provided the legal foundation to challenge these injustices
Yeah.
and push for a more equitable society.
Absolutely. It was and continues to be a landmark case, not just for what it achieved in 1954, but for the ripple effects it continues to have today.
It's a powerful legacy.
Brown v. Board showed the world the power of the legal system to advance civil rights, but it also highlighted the importance of activism, grassroots movements, and a constant push for social change.
And what about Homer Plessy, the man who essentially sparked this whole legal battle decades earlier? It seems like his story often gets overshadowed by Brown v. Board.
You're right, it does. But his case was pivotal in setting the stage for that later victory.
His act of defiance, his willingness to challenge the status quo, he was incredibly courageous.
It was. Even though his case resulted in a setback, it planted the seeds for future challenges to segregation.
It reminds us that progress isn't always linear. Sometimes you have to take a step back
Yeah.
to ultimately take 2 steps forward.
Exactly. And those early defeats, those moments where justice seems out of reach, they often serve as powerful inspiration for future generations to continue the fight.
To keep pushing for a more just and equitable world.
That's right.
As we're discussing all of this, it strikes me that Brown v. Board, it wasn't just about desegregating schools.
No, it went much deeper than that.
It was about something much bigger, something more fundamental about the very fabric of American society.
Absolutely. It was about dismantling this deeply ingrained notion that certain groups of people are inherently inferior simply because of the color of their skin.
That's a powerful statement.
It was a fight for recognition, for dignity, for the basic human right to be treated equally under the law.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the bravery of people like Homer Plessy and Ruby Bridges, standing up and challenging the system like
It
that.
takes real courage to do what they did.
They were true pioneers in the fight for equality.
They were.
Their stories are powerful reminders that progress doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, dedication,
And a belief that a better world is possible.
a belief that things can change.
Exactly.
We've
Yeah.
talked a lot about the past, but what about the future? What lessons can we learn from Brown v. Board? And what does it all mean for us today?
I think one of the most important takeaways is that the pursuit of equality isn't a destination. It's a journey.
A journey that we're all on together.
We can celebrate the victories like Brown v. Board, but we can't become complacent. There's always more work to do.
There's always more progress to be made.
Absolutely.
It's like that quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." But it doesn't bend on its own, does it?
No, it needs a push,
It takes effort, vigilance,
a willingness to challenge injustice wherever we see it.
to speak up and say, this is not right.
Exactly. And it's not just about changing laws, it's about changing hearts and minds.
It's about creating a society where everyone feels valued, respected, and has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Regardless of the color of their skin, their background, their beliefs.
That's the kind of world we should all be striving for.
It is.
And that means acknowledging the systemic inequalities that still exist.
The disparities in education, healthcare, housing.
The criminal justice system, the list goes on.
We have to address these issues head on.
Yeah. So Brown v. Board was a turning point, no doubt. But it was just one step on a much longer journey.
A journey that's still unfolding.
And we all have a role to play in shaping that journey.
We do.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of Brown v. Board now
I'm glad to hear that.
and its impact on American society.
It's a case that continues to resonate today.
It does. And I hope our listeners are feeling the same way, inspired to think critically about the ongoing fight for equality and how they can contribute to creating a more just and inclusive world.
That's what we hope for with every deep dive, to spark conversations and inspire action.
Exactly. I think it's fitting to circle back to where we began, that image of Ruby Bridges, bravely facing that hostile mob as a 6-year-old girl.
A powerful image of courage in the face of adversity.
Her story and the story of Brown v. Board, they're ultimately stories of hope and resilience. They remind us that change is possible.
Even when it seems impossible.
They're a call to action for all of us, to stand up for what's right, to challenge injustice, and to never stop striving for a better tomorrow.
Well said.
And on that note, I think we'll bring this deep dive to a close. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. and its relevance to the present. If you're as fascinated by these explorations of the past as we are, be sure to subscribe to the Deep Dive for more thought-provoking discussions. We'll see you next time.